Jade, you can hear me. That's a good litmus test. Yeah.
Yes, you
okay,
sound
good.
wonderful.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I hope everyone is enjoying the conference so far. I know it's only kind of just started today, but I know I am. I love the keynote. She was great. So many great recommendations and just really, really nice people. And that's something I really like about QM is just how involved and open everybody is and willing to share and build and grow. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm very, very grateful and honored. Now, the original title of this webinar was Beating the Forgetting Curve, How to Bridge the Memory Gap with Low Stakes Formative Assessment. However, since I had to pivot this presentation a little bit to fit our new virtual circumstances, I figured I'd also change the name of the presentation to fit the spirit of the time. So welcome to Flattening the Forgetting Curve. Not only does this make me giggle a little bit, alliteratively, it's a better title, and it's just much more accurate in ways of description of what we're going to talk about today. So a little bit about me. I am an instructional designer at Columbia University. I have a master's in instructional design and delivery. I'm fascinated with how the brain meets the mind and how we learn. I'm constantly reading more and more literature about it, becoming more and more of an academic in that respect, as well as a practitioner. I've been a teacher for nearly a decade now, and I am an instructional designer at Columbia University School of Professional Studies. And most importantly, I am a certified QM peer reviewer. But enough about me, let's look at our learning objectives for the presentation. So after participating in this webinar, you will be able to explain the brain's average rate of forgetting, use 3 evidence-informed assessment strategies that lead to higher memory retention, design low-stakes assessments to increase memory, and space a series of assessments to enhance the strength of memory storage and retrieval. So to frame this webinar appropriately, I like to talk a little bit about memory from the vantage point of an instructional designer. So I'm not going to wax philosophical or drone on about neurons and neurobiology, or as much as I'd like to nerd out for 20 minutes about Blade Runner. What I am going to do is start out with a basic definition of memory that serves the purpose of the presentation, give a breakdown of that definition, and offer a metaphor for thinking about memory as it relates to enhancing retention. So, memory is the function of the brain through which information is encoded, stored, and retrieved. As you can see, for our intents and purposes, memory has 3 parts. That is encoding, storage, and retrieval. We'll touch on all 3 today because they're all very important. However, we will maintain our focus on storage and retrieval, especially retrieval. So before we really dive in, for context, I'm going to give you a very simplified explanation of these 3 components. But in order to do that, I want you to first imagine a single memory as a cabin in the woods. For example, this forest here is the messiness of your mind, and in it sits one of your memories, right? And the pathway to it. Encoding is represented by the quality of materials used to build the cabin. Storage is represented by how well the cabin is built and maintained. And retrieval is represented by the path back to it. Now, again, I'm going to be focusing mainly on storage and retrieval and how one of these can lead to the strengthening of the other. So, to revisit our metaphor, the cabin is the combination of bits of information that make a memory. The path to it represents our ability to access it, and the woods represents the active messiness of our brains, which loves to interfere with our memories. And hopefully I'll have time to talk about that later on. Now, the strength of our ability to access that memory depends on how often we visit it after we built it. If we don't go back to it with some degree of frequency, then that messiness will grow over the path, so to speak, and it will be exceedingly difficult to find our way back. In fact, if the forest has grown over the path, chances are the cabin itself has started to decay and may be in need of rebuilding. But if you return to that memory enough times, that path will become like an indelible line, and getting to it will be much easier for much longer. In short, to paraphrase someone much smarter than myself, once you learn something, if you don't use it, you lose it. So, What's the best practice to strengthen our ability to retrieve memories? Well, retrieval practice, of course. Here's a basic definition of retrieval practice. Actively recalling information in order to increase our ability to access it at will. As it turns out, when it comes to better memory, pulling stuff out of your head is better than putting the same stuff in again. What this implies for learning and teaching is that it's much better to answer questions about information you received than reread or view the same information again in a different mode. For example, writing a journal entry or doing a short quiz of what you learned from reading an essay is more effective than watching a video on the same topic or rereading the same essay again. But it doesn't just have to be practice questions like the ones you'll find at the back of the book, usually. Retrieval practice comes in many different forms. Typically, low-stakes formative assessment works best for incorporating it into the classroom. That is, these formative assessments are leveraged to assist learning more than gauge learning. So just as long as the learners are actively retrieving and pulling out that aligned information, they will see an increase in retention. So what does the research show? A study done by Roediger and Karpicki. You might be familiar with them. They wrote a book called Make It Stick, not Made to Stick by the Heath brothers, but Make It Stick. And it was about learning and memory. And this is one of the studies they did leading up to writing that book. It showed that those who participate in retrieval practice retain their memories much longer than those who reread the material. So as you can see from the graph, after 7 minutes of reviewing content, the gray group reread the content and the blue group answered practice questions. Then they took 3 tests, one 5 minutes after, one 2 days later, and another after a week. Now what they found was rereading garnered a slightly better test score like immediately after the 5 minutes. However, that group forgot all that information at an alarming rate, whereas those in the group that answered practice questions held on to that information for much longer. So the first strategy that I'd like to give you in this webinar is use low stakes formative assessments as retrieval practice to enhance memory retention. And I'm going to go and dive a little bit deeper into this. These strategies that I give you are kind of going to build on each other to create a larger framework. Now, going back to Roediger and Karpicki's research, you'll notice that, yes, information is retained longer if retrieval practice is used. However, those memories still decay at a steady rate. So to go back to our cabin in the woods metaphor, the forest is still going to grow over the path at some point. And the reason for this is the forgetting curve. Now, at this point in the session, I would usually go into the importance of forgetting and what causes us to forget, which is fascinating. But we only have so much time. Like I said in the beginning, like this probably should be a 15-minute presentation instead of a 25 one. So before I explain what the forgetting curve is, I'll just say that forgetting itself, forgetting is not a defect of the brain. It's a crucial regulatory function that keeps us, 1, sane, 2, organized up here, and 3, ultimately useful. So the forgetting curve. To put it simply, Hermann Ebbinghaus, back in the 1800s, his research charts the rate at which we forget things. As you can see from the graph, once we learn something, we immediately start to forget it. In fact, in the first day, we lose 2/3 of what we learned. That is to say, according to Ebbinghaus's recently replicated study, you will only remember 1/3 of what I've said here today. That is, if I'm the only session you attend. Now, just think of that in terms of return on investment, right? So this blue dot represents what you paid for. And in a month, this red dot represents what you'll be able to use. Now, I'm not a finance guy, thank God, but I would say that is a poor investment. If you don't do any retrieval practice within a month, you'll have only 20% of the value of what you purchased. Think about it this way. Has this ever happened to you? You buy a bag of potato chips. You're very excited to have them, and you were more than happy to pay for them. But when you open the bag, you get this. It's a very common disappointment, and it's kind of how I felt after undergrad, except I'm still paying for that bag of chips. But I digress. Here's another example. Let's say you're moving your company to a new location and you hire 10 moving vans and you pay up front. However, when it comes to moving day, only 2 trucks show up. Now, not only have you been hamstringed by the moving company, you now only have 20% of the resources to accomplish 100% of the task. The point I'm driving toward is, without leveraging some form of retrieval practice in our courses, this is what we're doing to students. They leave classes, courses, whole programs with only 1/5 of the tools to do the jobs that we're supposed to be training them for. So what can we do to make sure they're leaving our courses with enough know-how to tackle authentic problems? How do we get from this to this? How do we flatten the forgetting curve? So along with retrieval practice, what's the best practice? Well, distributed practices, combining practices to synthesize outcomes is your best bet. There is really no one theory that leads to an ultimate outcome. It's always a synthesis, it's always nuanced, but these evidence-informed, evidence-based practices are always good to use as a map to get you there. As it turns out, one of the best ways to improve access to memory is to retrieve it right before we start to forget it. And we can use Ebbinghaus's curve to time these retrieval events so to reset and flatten the rate of forgetting. Another important tidbit here is that with every retrieval practice, the less often you have to do them. The reason for this is because when you pull something from your memory, just when your brain starts to put it in the things to forget pile, it then tags it as useful and puts it in the do not throw away just yet pile. And it takes longer to forget. Just like each time the forest grows over the path, if you trample on those sprouts as you make your way back to the cabin, things become less and less likely to grow there. And soon the path just stays clear for easy access for much longer in between visits. All metaphors aside, here's what the research shows. 3 groups, this is from Robert Bjork, and it was replicated by Kang pretty recently. 3 groups were given the same test and the same amount of time to study for it. That amount was 3 hours. However, Group A was only allowed to study for a ½ hour at a time, Group B an hour at a time, and Group C in 1 3-hour block. This is the difference between massed and distributed practice. What most students do is mass practice. They wait to the end and they cram. What researchers found was that the more the practice was spaced out, the better retention the information over time. However, what they also discovered was that the amount of time between the practice sessions was vital to it actually working. So as we noted in the previous slides, each gap between retrievals needs to be wider than the last because your brain has to start to forget the information in order for retrieval to be most effective. And with each retrieval practice, it takes a little bit longer to forget. So you need to space those out also a little bit longer to allow yourself to forget those things, or at least start to forget them. So the second strategy I like to give you is incrementally increase the space between retrieval practices to enhance retention. And if you want, you can substitute retrieval practices with formative assessment because that's basically what they are. So this is what this might look like. You have a small quiz just after class, a mind map the next day, a discussion in the middle of the week, and maybe a blog post or a journal entry at the end of the week. Now, I want to note that these assessments work best if they're small. They shouldn't take longer than 15 to 30 minutes. They can even be 5 minutes and be just as effective as far as the research shows. And they should be accompanied by built-in feedback. And this is really important. After they complete these assessments, provide them with the correct answers and rationale for those answers. Or if they're wrong, tell them why they're wrong and then give them the correct answers. Immediate feedback is and I can't stress this enough, is the equivalent of ethically injecting your assessments with performance-enhancing drugs. It takes your quiz from this guy to this guy. Seriously, feedback with every assessment. Please do that. So Lance Armstrong jokes aside, how do we scaffold all of this? Well, there's 3 types of retrieval. and they all work well for different purposes. They are recognition, cued recall, and free recall. Recognition consists of recognizing or identifying the correct answer from a list. So multiple choice questions are a form of recognition retrieval practice. It is the easiest form of retrieval and one most often used in the beginning of a series of assessments. It's great for surface level learning, and it's an excellent launch pad, and it affords easy ways to embed that automatic feedback I just talked about. Cued recall is a little more difficult, but it still provides the learner with some training wheels. Unlike recognition, no list of options to choose from is provided. However, a prompt, hint, or cue related to the information being remembered is given. For example, if learners had a list of animals to remember, a cued recall would give categories of animals. For instance, instead of asking learners to list all the animals they just learned, a cued prompt would say something like, write down as many birds, dogs, and lizards you learned. And it helps categorize and organize those memories, cue them, and pull them out. It can also take the form of sentence completion or fill in the blank or a partially completed concept map like the one you see on the slide, where main nodes are pre-filled and connectors are queued up for the learner to make those connections and find those connections up here. This form of retrieval practice is more beneficial than recognition due to the fact that the learner must generate the answer rather than simply spot it in a list. And the last one, free recall, is the hardest, but it is also the most beneficial form of retrieval practice. It provides no environmental support. That is, there's no cues or hints. This is obviously a lift in difficulty, but that difficulty leads to stronger storage of memory. Keep in mind, when faced with retrieving needed information in an unpredictable environment, such as having your car break down in the middle of nowhere, learners who participated in any type of retrieval practice for engine repair, let's say, are much likely to remember what they need to. However, those that participated in free recall are advantaged to have a much better understanding of the information they're retrieving and thus can use it to a greater effect. So when setting up your retrieval practice for the week, an effective scaffolding would be to start with recognition and then move to recall. Make each retrieval a little more complex than the last, because the frequency of retrieval, how many times you do retrieval practices, increases the ability to remember. But the difficulty of retrieval increases how accurate, understood, and transferable those memories are. So frequency increases retrieval strength and difficulty increases storage strength. So using Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve, we can strategically place formative assessments to have the greatest effect. Within this timed framework, we move learners from questions to answer to problems to solve. We start with concrete, simple, and gradually shift to abstract, complex. So the final strategy I want to give you today is incrementally increase the difficulty of retrieval practice using the 3 types of recall to enhance depth of understanding. Oh yeah, there is one last thing before I forget. I really wanted to talk about the practice of interleaving today and layering it onto this framework, because interleaving has been proven a very effective tool in increasing memory and just being able to make a combination of connections in any kind of given unpredictable situation. But we don't have enough time without sacrificing time for questions. I'm thinking the next time I'll have a 50-minute presentation and make it more interactive with some activities, make it more participatory. However, what we do have time for is the most important part of the presentation, and that's signing up for spaced retrieval practice of the information in this webinar. So if you download the slides from the conference website and click the link on the Google form, I think it's on slide 59 or 57. This will take you to a form that will allow you to give me direct feedback on the presentation so I can retool it, make it better for next time. Everything's iterative, right? And in one day, I will send you the first in a series of short retrieval practices designed to increase your retention of this presentation. So Each practice event that I'm going to send to you is created with a different Web 2.0 tool. And this will demonstrate some of the free resources out there that you can use to incorporate it into your course. And I guess this is the time where there's any questions.
So David, at the moment, there is no open questions in the Q&A or in the chat.
Wow.
Oh, here we do. We got one. What are the best design strategies to facilitate a learning experience where students don't cram and practices in a distributed way? For example, in an LMS, you do not release content until a certain amount of time has passed after completing the previous content. How would this impact an asynchronous, self-paced experience?
Okay, so just to reiterate the question, how do you stop students from cramming in an asynchronous experience? Like in LMS, for example, here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then reshare my screen because I actually have something on one of my working screens that shows how you can do this, I guess. Let's see, is it screen 3? It is. Okay, there we go. Everybody see that? It's the course I'm working on. At the bottom of the assignment in your LMS, you have this kind of available from and until. What I recommend is making your assignments, or at least giving your assignments to students on the day that they're due. Don't make them available any earlier than that. So a lot of the time students, if you have like 4 retrieval practices, this is due this day, this is due this day, this is due the next, some students will just do it all at once and totally miss the point of doing this. What you do is you only release those things in an asynchronous set on specific days and dates. Or if you don't have the ability to mark them that way, I would say like limit the amount of them and space them out more. So they'd have to do specific things before they can access the retrieval practice. I hope that answers your question.
So then our next question is, do you have a recommendation or favorite tools for storage and for retrieval?
A recommendation for tools for storage and retrieval? You like Web 2.0 tools? Is that what you mean? Yeah. Web 2. Oh man. Let's see. Google Forms works really well. It's free and easy. Kahoot's good. Any of those ones that like help you get to the benefits of the testing effect. If you sign up, I will demonstrate each one of these tools for storage and retrieval, and you'll get to not only experience it from the student point of view, but then you'll get to dive in and see how you can use it yourself. So I don't really want to give away the farm without making you sign up, basically.
All right, so I do have one comment and then we'll have one more question since we only have 3 minutes left.
Sure.
The comment is that Canvas allows you to space out when the assignments are available.
Mm-hmm.
And then what looks like maybe the last question today, I use short multi-choice weekly with longer written responses every 3, then the paper as a big question answer point. How would you better incrementalize? Is this a word?
Yeah, we can call it a word. Sure. Let me see. Multi-choice weekly, longer written responses every 3 weeks. Then the paper is the big question answer point. What I would say is to chunk out, like a multi-choice weekly is really good. Longer written responses every 3. I would say that depends on the content you're teaching, and maybe break those longer written responses or multiply them and put them in the same week. Make those weekly as well, just space them out between the weeks. So like right after class or the day after class, do that multiple choice. And then they have to kind of engage with more content and then do a longer written response. A good way to do that for those longer written responses is to post a discussion question, and in 2 parts. The first part being the main prompt and what they have to respond to. And then after a set amount of time, people have to respond to each other's posts, and then you can give feedback, and then they can go back and edit their response to reflect what feedback and to incorporate the feedback that they get. That like kind of preloads them with content knowledge when you do the multiple choice, and then it makes them think and make connections with the discussion, and then incorporate feedback and different vantage points from other people in a community of practice or constructing knowledge. And then they can maybe even, you can have that longer written response as a learning journal, add a metacognitive layer on the top of it, and have them think backwards about what were the processes that they had to go through in order to come up with these answers that they did. That's a very powerful tool. The big question, the big paper, I honestly think should be in chunks and milestones. Chunking is also a very powerful tool that works much better, because if you have the big paper at the end, students are going to save it to the end instead of slowly working on it in chunks. So if you tell them, okay, your thesis and introduction and your research question or whatever it is has to be done in an outline in a one-pager in 3 weeks, they can work on that as long as it's aligned with the weekly quizzes and the discussion questions, and have those things build and align with each other. Sorry if I rambled.
Well, David, we are just about out of time, but one attendee has tried the form and is saying that it requires login to complete it.
Oh, let me go and thank you. I do a lot of forms. Sometimes I have this issue. Let me go ahead. Just while
And
we're
then we have
here.
someone else who's interested in signing up. Would you be willing to drop that link into the chat so then people can simply cut and paste?
Sure.
And then that will also be in his PowerPoint material, so he will have those after the session.
Great.
So David, any closing remarks for us today?
No closing remarks. I think I covered everything. I would say that if you, I would say look into interleaving if you haven't already. I mean, I'm so remiss that I didn't get to cover it today. It's so important, and it really kind of will change the way that you, it'll really help you pivot your instruction to be much more effective. And although it seems like it doesn't work while you're doing it, the results are phenomenal. They really do. It really does work very, very well, especially if you scaffold it along with how I outline the strategies today. Okay, I'm going to paste this link in the URL. I think you just need to log into your Google account to access the form. I think it's just, you have to have a Google account to get it. But it's not restricted to, I see people are responding already. It's not restricted to any other type of email other than an EDU account or a Google account.
And then David, can you actually resend that link to all panelists and all attendees? Currently, I'm the only one who can see it.
Okay, sorry about that. There we go.
All right, again, thank you so much. We are now going to have a 10-minute break, and we will be back at 11:35.
Great. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Have a great conference, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, David.
Thanks.